Thank you for joining us for our Food Tech Challenge Fireside Chat. We're so thrilled to be joined today by David Rosenberg. David, as many of you will know, is CEO and co-founder of AeroFarms, a mission-driven company that builds and operates advanced vertical farms in urban environments. David has a wealth of experience in this industry, and both he and his company have been recognized internationally for their contributions. It is really exciting to have David involved in the Food Tech Challenge as the finalist judge. And we want to thank him for giving us the chance to speak to him today. David, it would be great if you could give us some insight into your background, what inspired you to work in this sector, and have you always been drawn to promoting sustainability?
It's great to be here with you. Thanks so much, Rania. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart. This is actually my fourth Change the World company I've been a part of. The second one I co-founded and led. My last company was the first company to achieve what's called cradle-to-cradle product certification. To a lot of environmental activists, this is considered the gold standard of the environmental movement. And that gave me a greater awareness of waste, inefficiencies, opportunities in the market. What attracted me specifically to vertical farming were two things. One is the macro side of all the tensions from a food security, food safety standpoint, as well as the technology side. I'm a technology enthusiast of how LEDs, light emitting diodes, and the decreasing cost structure of LEDs could open up new markets like vertical farming. But what I love doing is bringing people together, bringing teams together, and solving big problems that could have massive impact. The solutions could have massive impact on society.
And what were the biggest challenges that you faced when you started your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, the first time, so back in my nanotech days, was the first time I started a company over 20 years ago, it was getting money as a first-time CEO. It's always easier the second time around, but when one doesn't have that reputation, it's a leap of faith for people to put money, millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions of dollars, into an entrepreneur, a first-time entrepreneur. And I also like going into sectors where there are lots of inefficiencies and often underinvestment, but often the business models and the path to success is a little harder because the scale up time sometimes is slower. So my last company was a nanotech company in the construction space. Here in agriculture, these are industries, massive industries, lots of inefficiencies, but not ones where there's a lot of technology flowing into the space and the money isn't there. If you could have a good business model, there's opportunities to make good money and solve massive problems, but you have to be creative of how one attracts the money into the space. So both the sector could be an inhibitor, as well as certainly having a reputation. So the first time one does it, for me, that was 20 years ago, it was the resilience of getting a lot of rejections before the first investor said yes.
What brought your attention to food safety and security in particular?
So it's similar to construction. It's industries where you don't have a lot of money and a lot of innovators looking to change the industry. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in agriculture and growing food, a tremendous amount of inefficiencies. Just look at spoilage. So in leafy greens, for example, if 60% of what comes off the farm doesn't get consumed, just looking at that number, one realizes there are tremendous inefficiencies along the whole value chain. And where there are inefficiencies, there are opportunities. So it's often better to be a solution to a problem. And I've built companies both ways, where one seeks out a problem and then understands what problem one wants to solve and then finds solutions to a problem, as opposed to finding a product and trying to find a market for that product. So here in building AeroFarms, it started off with what problem to solve. It was food waste, agriculture, the inefficiencies in agriculture, and then finding a solution. For me, it was vertical farming to help in that sector.
That's wonderful. AeroFarms has received a lot of accolades. What do you think sets your company apart from the other food technology companies out there?
It's a tough industry and we're very vertically integrated. So it's hard to do one thing well. And at AeroFarms, we're trying to do two things well. So we're both a technology company and an operating company. And we realized to be a great technology company, we need to operate. because we need to be on the front lines and understand which way to go. And at the same time, to be a great operating company, because as leader in the industry, we need to be a great technology company to constantly make the right zigs and zags. So we're very vertically integrated. For example, in engineering, we have mechanical engineers, structural, lighting, electrical, PLC, process, industrial design, all these engineers that are constantly looking at how do we reduce capital cost, how do we reduce operating cost while we improve quality. At the same time, they're working with plant biologists, plant physiologists, plant pathologists, molecular biologists, microbiologists. So how do we understand the plant science? At the same time, working on the genetics. How do we optimize genetics, where genetics are typically optimized for drought resistance, pest resistance, where we're now focused on taste, texture, yield, nutrient density. At the same time, there's a lean manufacturing component of how operations come in together. There are environmental controls, and then there's software and data science that ties it in together. So to answer your question, there's a tremendous amount of vertical integration, and within that, there's a lot of partnerships. We have partnerships with Dell Technologies, with Bell Labs, with smaller companies like Green Venus, like biotech companies, with companies like BASM. So with big companies, with small companies, appreciating it takes a lot of technology together to go ahead and advance this industry.
And how important do you think the government's role is in enabling these innovations?
It's incredibly important. Here, public-private partnerships are important in places where externalities aren't obviously in the calculus of commerce. What's meant by that is some manufacturing processes have a lot of pollution, have a lot of waste. But if you take pollution, if that's not in the calculus of the manufacturing cost of the product or people buying that product, then it's possible a bad actor that pollutes more or wastes more or uses more water has the same or better economics than a good actor. So what we don't want is a society where good actors are at a competitive disadvantage. And these externalities are exactly where policymakers and public-private partnerships could level the playing field so a good actor is not at a competitive disadvantage. Additionally, some areas take further investment and capital costs. So this is a capital-intensive industry. So one of the hard parts about capital-intensive industries in early stage is how do you get debt into a project? Debt likes history. And if you're an innovative company and you don't have that history, then one doesn't have as much debt and one has to put more capital into a project. So from a project financing place here too, governments could help innovators in new industries by providing either cheaper sources of financing or helping the economics that are otherwise, these externalities that otherwise could reward bad actors, and how do you get it to reward good actors? One of the easier ways to do that is with purchasing power. There's a tremendous amount of purchasing power with governments. So just buying products from good actors is one way to tip the scales. Also purchase agreements so people can finance along those purchase agreements. There are lots of ways to do it. And the broader point is this is spaces that are good for society, good for environment, innovative, are great places, important places for public-private partnerships.
And COVID-19 has seemingly changed the mindsets of governments, businesses, and society, and has put a spotlight on the importance of food security and the importance of self-sufficiency. Have you seen a surge in interest in your technology since COVID-19? Do you think there really has been a change in approach?
There certainly has been. So we, for example, at AeroFarms, even before COVID, we decided the MENA region is going to be a focus for us because it aligns with our value proposition of we don't need any arable land. We grow without soil, without sun. We use energy, and we love to use renewable energy to grow plants. But here, if you think of the greenhouse effect, it's called the greenhouse effect because it gets really hot in greenhouses, or it gets really hot and plants want a very specific, often temperature and humidity range. So in fully controlled agriculture, we could control that temperature and humidity very effectively. And the point is that fully controlled agriculture aligns well with the environmental landscape in the MENA region to enable local food production at scale. And in pandemics like COVID, people see the stresses in our food system. So our food system is created with centralized food production. People want access to food 365 days a year. And in centralized food production, we have economies of scale, we have cheaper food that's available. But when there's a crack in the system, then people feel the reverberations of those cracks all over the world. And it puts a lot of inherent risk in our food system. People realize a more democratized approach to food manufacturing, meaning we're manufacturing spread out. While that adds costs because we don't have the economies of scale, it de-risks the whole food supply system. So people are more aware of these cracks. And I'm not sure if it's a trend or a fad, but certainly there's a lot of interest of democratizing our food system, of enabling local food manufacturing. And at its essence, that's what we do. We enable local food manufacturing, whether it's on the equator or in the North Pole, anywhere in the world. And in regions where there's not inherently farmland, like good farmland, and there's water scarcity, arable land scarcity, these are areas that align and we're going faster. So the amount of interest from the region has picked up tremendously. And in other places that are more food secure, have water, where food security and water security is of greater concern.
Well, I'm sure we can all agree that this was really a thought-provoking and inspiring session. Once again, I'd like to thank David for his time and sharing his insights with us. I hope you all be joining us for the next Fireside Chat, as well as tuning in tomorrow for the awards ceremony. If you haven't already registered for tomorrow's event, you could do so on the foodchallenge.com. David, thank you so much.
Rania, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.